The King of Kings Himself stepped out of heaven and died for me so that I have a home and place with Him one day if I have Him in my heart. So how much more should I practice this self-control, this dedication of my body, of myself, to follow after Him and pursue Him? It should be so much greater, that desire. So much grander, so much deeper. That should be the very essence of our being, church, if you know Jesus. Our very essence should be, my body, this is not my life to live anymore. The old Denver died when I was 8 years old. Not like Taylor Swift did, but that's okay. The younger people get that. The older people were what? Anyway. Myself died when I was 8 years old. It's no longer I who lives, it's Christ who lives in me. My body is the temple in which He lives. I don't want to defile His house. I don't know how many people would like somebody coming in your house and spray painting the walls and taking the sledgehammer to your TV. I don't think too many people would like somebody defiling their house. But we do that to His house on a daily basis. On a daily basis. We come crashing in with sledgehammers of sin and smash up against His walls. He lives within you now. So therefore, it should be within us that, hey, I'm going to make sure that His house is as clean as possible. Now, you can't do that on your own. You can only do that if He's within you. You can only do that if He's living in you. You've got the power within Him, so you got to keep the house in order. So we have an imperishable prize in store for us. All those who know Jesus have a home in heaven one day, a mansion that's going to be glorious and grand. And the writer of Revelation, John the Revelator, said, hey, I've seen heaven and only half has been told. What I'm saying, the other half, I can't fathom what's over there. So we have a whole other half of heaven to see that's waiting for us. So we should practice self-control when temptations arise, when the desire to do sin arises within us, then we ought to turn and flee and run as far away as we possibly can from that temptation. Why? Athletes do it for a perishable trophy that's going to go away. We have an imperishable prize. But number two, I think this is even bigger than that. Paul says this, I'm going to read this again. Paul says, I do not run aimlessly. He says, I do not box as one beating the air, but I discipline my body and keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. Now I want you to picture this for a moment. Every athlete knows the rules to the game. They know the rules to the game. I wish Garrett was here so we could talk about football. Saturday's a football day. All I do is watch football on Saturday. And you see the flags come out. Somebody has broken the rules. Well, they've got a rule now that if you hit somebody with your helmet and their helmet, then you're ejected from the ball game. Disqualified. You can't do that. You can't hit somebody with your helmet and their helmet. You get kicked out of the game. You get disqualified. So what Paul is saying here is, listen, church, I practice self-discipline. I practice self-control because I don't want to get disqualified. I don't want to get kicked out of the game. Well, Denver, what game are you talking about? Your testimony. You don't want to lose your testimony. As a Christian, having Jesus in your heart, the next precious thing you have is your testimony. Your testimony. That's your ability to tell others about Him. What He has done for you, you now have a testimony. You can go and you can share others. Outside of Jesus in your heart, that's the second greatest thing that you have in this world, is your testimony. So what Paul is saying here is, I practice self-control. I practice self-discipline. I don't box as a shadow boxer. And you see shadow boxers, they just beat the air aimlessly. And he's saying, I do what I do so I don't get disqualified. I don't disqualify myself. If I stand up here preaching and I preach a message about not doing such and such, and then you see me an hour later doing such and such, what does that do to my reputation? What does that do to my word? What does that do to my self-control? You won't listen to me anymore. Well, what good is it for Denver to say to do this if Denver goes and does it when he walks out the doors of the church? I would disqualify myself. I would have to sit down. I would be ruined. My testimony is over. I find it quite odd, and many of you know this. Nurses do this the worst. And I'm dating one, and she knows that it's coming, so it's okay. She doesn't do this, but it's okay. You'll go into a checkup, and a nurse will listen to your lungs. She'll hear your lungs, and she says, "All right, you shouldn't be smoking. You don't need to smoke and do this, that, and the other." And then the second you walk out of the hospital, what's that nurse doing?
Sitting there smoking.
Chain smoking, right outside the hospital. Well, why should I listen to you? You're doing the exact same thing that you told me not to do. It's the same thing with the Christian walk. Watch an unbeliever. You talk to an unbeliever, "Hey, you shouldn't do that." And then you turn around and do it. And that unbeliever sees you. Why should I listen to them? Why should I listen to them? I'm just as good, if not better, than that person. And he says he follows Christ. I'm going to do my own thing. I've got it taken care of. I practice self-control better than he does. At least I don't tell people to do one thing, and then I turn around and do it. Or tell them not to do it, and then I turn around and do it. That's a liar. That's two-faced. You watch Batman, that's an actual representation right there. Talking out of both sides of our mouths. Sure, we can talk a good game as Christians, but does our walk line up with what is coming out of our mouths? That's what Paul's talking about. That's what Paul's talking about. He says, you watch these athletes. I got two of my best friends on the KSU volleyball team. I wish they were here this morning. They're playing Louisville at 3 o'clock up in Kentucky. But I wish they were here. They'd be here in a couple of weeks. They said that they'd come. And I hear the stories of all that they do. That they go in and they get IV drips, and then they go and they practice for 4 hours. But they got to wake up at 3 o'clock, and then they got to do this, and they got to do that, and they got to do the other. And they're in great shape. They're in phenomenal shape. They do all of this to get a ring, to get a trophy, to get a pat on the back. And it's worth it to them. You watch any athlete that's worth their grain of salt, boy, it means something to them. It runs deep, doesn't it, David? It runs deep. That desire to win is buried inside of you. And any athlete that's played any kind of sport, boy, you know it. You know that desire to get that trophy, to be on top, runs deep within you. But when it comes to your walk lining up with your talk in the Christian life, it's kind of like, I can let that slide. We'll use the excuse, I'm going to mess up. I'm going to mess up. I messed up this time. That's all right. Why is that an excuse? Oh, I'll mess up. Is that an excuse to sin? Paul says, God forbid that be an excuse. He says, God forbid that's an excuse. Well, God's grace is infinite, right? And His mercy is infinite, so I can do whatever I want. He says, God forbid that happen. God forbid that be the case. We practice self-control, self-discipline. We practice showing the fruits of the Spirit that we've been talking about for 9 weeks. Showing love, having joy, having peace, having patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, and gentleness. We practice all this with self-control. Why? Because people watch us. The world watches. When you wear the Christian sleeve, all eyes are turned on you. All eyes are watching you. I'll tell you how extreme this is. Now, I'm not into Greek life at Kennesaw State. I'm not. But I've heard stories that when somebody in a sorority wears their letters, and I don't know how many people were in a sorority or fraternity, that's not the point of the story, but if they wear their letters across their chest, then they have to have full makeup, their hair done, they have to walk proper, they have to look good. Why? Because they're bearing the name of their sorority. And they don't want the name of the sorority to be downgraded because somebody doesn't look proper when they're wearing the letters. Now that's extreme right there, ain't it? But that's what they do to keep hold of their good name. Christians, why is it the case that we don't want to hold on to our good name with that kind of earnesty? When we wear the Christian sleeve, we put that patch on. By the way, once you get saved, that patch is on. You can never take it off. There's no ripping the patch off and, I'm going to be like the world today and I'm going to be like a Christian today. No, that's not the case. Once you accept Jesus in your heart, that patch is on you for good. It's on you for good. And you wear that everywhere that you go. I love what C.S. Lewis said. C.S. Lewis says it best often. He says this when it comes to practicing self-control. He says, if we insist on keeping hell, or even earth, we shall not see heaven. If we accept heaven, we shall not be able to retain even the smallest and most intimate souvenirs of hell. I'll read that again for some that weren't paying attention. It says this, if we insist on keeping hell or even earth, we shall not see heaven. But if we accept heaven, we shall not be able to retain even the smallest and most intimate souvenirs of hell. If you accept Jesus, if you accept heaven, then you ain't going to be able to get just an itty bitty little bit of sin into heaven. It ain't going to work. All this little flesh, well, this is my little teeny tiny sin that I like to commit. You ain't going to be able to carry it into heaven with you. It don't work like that. You can't have the souvenir in heaven. But what Paul is saying here is if you choose that, if you choose hell or even earth, he said you ain't never going to see it. To see heaven, this desire within me, my willingness to fall into that temptation, it's got to go. It's got to go. It's 100% Him or it isn't Him.
Right.
Plain and simple. You're either all in or you're all out. Read Revelations about what he says about a lukewarm Christian. You ain't too fond of it. The Bible says that if you're lukewarm, He will spew you out of His mouth. He doesn't like somebody that just kind of teeters one way or the other. Well, I'll go with my flesh today, but tomorrow, God, I promise I'll choose you. I promise tomorrow that I'll follow after you, but today just let me do a little bit about what I want to do. It doesn't work like that. Paul says we practice self-control for two reasons. He says, number one, you do it because you've got an imperishable award in store for you, which is heaven. You've got Jesus living inside of you. You now have the ability to resist temptation, to resist that sin. But number two, he says you do it because you don't want to disqualify yourself from the game. You don't want people to see you acting the way that you told them not to act, and then them look at you and say, well, I'm not going to follow that guy anymore. You're taking yourself out of the ball game. You watch sports. When a player commits a foul, they take themselves out of the game. They know they're coming out. They know they messed up, they're out. They're coming out. They sit down until the coach tells them to come back in. Listen, I watched my dad coach for 10, 12, how old were you, Whitney? 18? I watched Dad coach for probably upwards of 14 years that I can remember, even when I was a teeny tiny baby. And his players knew if they fouled, they stood by the bench until the sub could come in because they was going to sit down. They knew. They took themselves out. I don't want any Christian to know that. I don't want any Christian to think, oh, I messed up. I'm taking myself out of the game. Our unworthiness ought to motivate us to strive to be better. Our sinful nature ought not to lead us further into sin. It ought to be a self-realization that, yeah, I'm a sinner, yeah, I'm going to fall, but I don't want to. I don't want to fall. I don't want to commit the act that I do. What Paul said, I don't want to do what I do, but I did it anyways. The most tongue-twisting passage in the whole Bible. He says, I know that I shouldn't do it, but I do it. And the things that I should do, I don't do. So I know I'm going to fall. I know I'm human. I know I'm not perfect. But man, I'm going to strive for it because I want to stay in the game. I'm going to do what I can to practice self-control, to walk upright so I don't disqualify myself from the game. Why? I want to see souls come to know Jesus. David, don't you want to see souls come to know Jesus?
Amen.
Church, don't you want to see souls come to know Jesus?
Amen.
Listen, I've said it before, I'll say it again, I'm a country boy. I love my space. But in heaven, I want mansions stacked on top of mansions. I want a bunch of neighbors in heaven. And I pray that you do too. So my altar call is simply this. Are you practicing self-control? Are you walking upright? Does your talk line up with your walk? Are you doing the things that you tell others not to do? I can't see what that is. What is it?
It's a dog.
Oh, it's a dog. Practice self-control. Do you have that self-control within you? That when temptation arises, when you're faced with a sin, and man, it looks good. Doesn't Satan present sin in the good? Boy, he makes it look charming.
Yes, he does.
Satan ain't the pitchfork with the horns. That ain't him, man. He's slick. And he'll present that sin in such a fashion that, man, it looks good. You have the power within you to resist it, but do you have the self-control to turn away and run from it? That's my question. Or do you say, it's not a big deal. I can fall this one time. God will forgive me anyways. I encourage you this morning to ask yourself some hard questions. Ask yourself that. Do I practice self-control? Is my testimony intact? Or have people seen me acting the way that I shouldn't act, and I've disqualified myself from the law? I pray that that's not the case. And maybe you're here this morning and you say, Denver, yeah, I've disqualified myself. I've taken myself out of the game. There's redemption found in Calvary. There's grace that's found in Calvary. God can put you right back in the game if you'll let Him. But you got to be willing. You got to be willing to go. You got to be willing to work. You got to be willing to do. The cool thing is about it is God doesn't need you to get His work going, but He wants you. He don't need you to do anything, but He wants you to. He can find somebody else to fill your shoes just as good. But He wants you to work for Him. But it takes effort. It takes work. It takes self-control. It takes love. It takes joy. It takes peace. It takes patience. It takes kindness. It takes goodness. It takes faithfulness. It takes gentleness. And it takes self-control. Won't you stand as a man that comes and leads us in song? Even before the first note is struck, even before the first note is sung, I pray that you'll come this morning. Get your heart right with God. I know this was a tough message, but I pray that you'll come this morning. We'll sing one verse, maybe two. If no one comes, we'll go eat. So I pray that you'll come. Pray that you'll come.
Watching for you and for
all hearts are content. If not, these altars are still open even as we go eat. So if you want to come in and you want to pray, I pray that you'll do that. I don't think I have any other announcements besides there's no church tonight, no choir practice as well. Be back next Sunday. Josh will be bringing the word both in the AM and PM service. He's got a 2-part message on following Christ with childlike faith. So I pray that you'll be back both morning and evening, so you'll hear both parts. God bless you. Thank you so much for being here. I don't know how they want us to do it. I'm assuming they're ready. They've been back there working diligently. I'm assuming there'll be both lines going down both sides of the booth, so help yourself. I hope you'll stick around and eat with us. If not, God bless you. I'll see you in 2 Sundays. I won't be here next Sunday. Wesley, will you close us in prayer and say the offering? Now, I'm going to stand by this door so people come by and eat, and we'll be dismissed.
Father, we thank you. God, we have you in your house today, Lord. We thank you for the service that we've had. We thank you, Lord, for being here with us, Lord. And we want you to touch each heart here. Father, Lord, that fellowship hall will be just being prepared for us, Lord. We pray that you'll bless it to our lives and our lives will be to your service. Father, we just pray to watch over us, be with us through the night of this day.